Alright, I know I said I would do a live screening, but it's just too hard to get time to do so. So I figured I would just film and share. Sorry guys. Alrighty. So what we're going to be doing, this is on a panel. The biggest difference with a panel versus canvas is going to be the level of texture and bounce. So the downside about panel is because it's smooth or smoother. This one actually does have texture to it. You probably can't tell from this screen size, but when it's too smooth, and I'm sorry, my dog is drinking water. Anyway, when the texture is too smooth, what that means is it takes a layer or two before it really starts to pick up paint. And you'll see what I mean when I get started here. I always like to start with the eye, just because. I mean, who doesn't love eyes? This is my dog Sarah, by the way. So, my dogs are just having a blast making all kinds of noise right now. Sorry guys, try to ignore them as fast as you can. So cute though. They're really hard to ignore. So you can probably tell right here the breakup of the black paint is part of that texture I was talking about that's already on this. Just takes a little work sometimes to fill it in a little bit. That's why I usually prefer working on panel anyway versus canvas, is you have so much more control. Although your first layers might take a little bit more work, and the end result, it really, really shines. I don't know why my brush is separating so badly, but it is. I'm not getting a tight line like I want, so I'm going to move to a different brush. Still a filbert. I love the filberts. This one in particular is Escoda Prado number 2 filbert. One of my favorite sets of brushes are from that brand. And there's a few that I love from Princeton too. But they give you really good brush stability with the bristles, so they don't separate on you and as badly. Now I've abused my brushes pretty good, so they still separate a little bit when they've been overused. But there's ways to fix that. I've got brush conditioners that I can use, and my favorite so far is I've got one from Chelsea Fine Art Classical Studio Supplies. I've also got from Speedball their pink soap, which I actually like quite a bit. It feels really good on the brush. Also, by the way, one of the fun things, and I'm sorry, now they're eating. They're eating just some of the extra kibble from their breakfast. And they just have to be in here with me. You know how it is. So I'm focusing on the dark areas first of the eye. There's a purpose behind that. And there's my cockatiels. There's just no peace in this house. What can I say? Anyway, so getting the dark in first is instrumental in getting a good blend of color, making things look natural, because the unfortunate nature of things is we want to work on the lighter, the brights, the midtones versus the darks. And so we want to come in later and do the darks, but that's just unfortunately not how it works. If you do the darks too late, you're going to find yourself struggling to get it dark enough. It's always a struggle to get it dark enough at that point. So start dark, bring in the light later. And again, one of the joys of panel is you can scrub your brush a little bit on here. Of course, that damages the brush, and then you wind up with it flayed like mine is. But that's okay. We need to support the brush industry anyway, right? And buy more. Anyone else struggle with not buying an insane amount of stuff every time you go to the art store? Especially when you see a sale. Like, oh my god, brush sale. trying to get the structures of the eye down. Alright, so I feel like I've got enough of the black in, except I'm going to scrub a little bit right through here to get some of the shading. Okay, next I'm going to start bringing in some color. Now, one of the things I like to do is to make the eye just a little bit brighter than it is in natural life, just a hair, not much. Give me 1 second because I'm just mixing a little bit of color. Alright. Certain areas are just naturally going to be a little darker because they're getting less light, so I'm going to start with that. There we go. Getting a little bit of burnt umber here. Mixing it with some yellow medium. I'm going to put in just a tad of orange or tad of red with it just to warm it a hair. Yeah, I like that. Alright. Oh, for Pete's sake, those birds. I love them, I do. Okay, starting to bring a little bit of light color. I'm also kind of blending there on the panel directly. So one of the tricks of a rich brown eye is that your highlights are going to be pretty, well, blue. So can you tell what color this is? It's a blue. I don't know if it's very visible, but I'm going to use it to gray down some of the brown in the spots that are catching just the right level of light. Go. And that'll give a little bit more of a natural look when the later levels of, or layers of paint come down. Come back in a couple places with the black to keep the shape. I missed it a little bit because I've got glare on my end. I'm a little hard to see some areas, but I wanted to make sure you guys could see. So I'm kind of sacrificing my sight for yours. All right. A little bit blending. And I'll come back in with better, deeper, richer layers later. This is just the initial layer, okay? Remind yourself that you're not trying to get a finished painting with the first steps. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see with new artists, actually. Your expectation is there to have a finished painting from the get-go, and that is quite honestly just not how it works. There is a process, and if you don't follow the process, then you'll wind up with a situation where you have a lot of things you have to fix and correct later, and that's not fair to you to do that to yourself. So relax, enjoy the process, let it take you. You'll finish later. It's not going to hurt anything to pace yourself. All right, so next step, we're going to start working in the color around the face. I'm using a mix. It's kind of a gray-brown mixed with black, just to get some color, some darker color in here. Oh, got a little bit of hair on there. That's what happens when you live with dogs. I'm going to mix and blend as I go. I'm using a mop brush. This one is it's a Mini Mop 1/8 by Princeton, Velvet Touch brand. This is one of my favorite brushes to paint with, actually. I get quite far on paintings with these before I start getting into detail work. I'm working in the darks first. You'll see me do that most every painting. I'll work in the darks first, come in with the midtones, finish with the highlights. Need a little bit of, because I've let my palette sit kind of overnight, so I need a little medium to get this flow. Tiny little drops, all it takes. There we go. And that'll add a little flow to this. I'm just kind of scribbling around, just filling in the color. Darks first. Doesn't necessarily mean black, but definitely need dark. Getting a little burnt umber mixed in now with the black. This is going to be very dark looking because this is a very shadowed area. Now I know that whenever I come back to this later, I'm going to have hairs that go over it. And so I'm kind of pre-prepping myself here. I mean, you don't want to paint around individual hairs. So if you can tell, you know, it's always best to do a hair patch like this, starting dark and then bringing in medium tone or mid-tone, excuse me. And what I mean by mid-tone is, you know how this is really dark and the eye has this nice rich brown. That rich brown is mid-tone, this black's a shadow tone. So let's see, I'm just trying to trace where this goes. There we are. I've got just a handful of line work here. It's nothing too big because I'm going to do much of this freehand. I did a sketch trying to figure out how I wanted my layout to be in this unusual canvas. And so I just simply shaded the back of my drawing and then I redrew my lines so it would transfer the shaded back into my drawing. It's just one of the really easy ways to get this transferred without any real effort. Alright, so I've got all my really dark here and I'm just going to drag this paint up to get some tone blending, because this is more of a mid-tone here. But I'm going to use the dark tone to actually bring it in. It works really well to do it that way, especially when you're working on a panel. If you were doing this on a canvas, you'd find things are a little different. Okay, we need to get some volume in the ear. So I'm just going to scribble it in. A little bit of this. Hold on, let me get some of that excess off. This is just, the ear's got quite a bit of shadow in it, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill some of that in. Keeping it nice and soft. The goal right now, because this is a panel, I suggest trying to fill in all of the underpainting that you can at once, because you're going to get a much better blend of tonal values, and you're not going to have those interruption lines that you would see if you were to do, you know, take a break and stop from it. And by take a break, I'm talking about hours long break, not a few minutes. You can always take breaks here and there throughout. Just bear in mind that when you're working with browns, and browns are often the best thing to use for your underpainting, and that's because they are the fastest drying of the paint colors. And so I always suggest using that for your undertone, your underpainting, but they do dry quickly. So if you do take a break, don't take a long one, because it doesn't take very long at all for it to start to dry. So I'm just following the patterns of her hair. Bear with me, I'm just mixing some, I'm not really sure what to call it. It's more of a gray mixed down with a combination of a very light brown, like a kind of a Naples yellow sort of, with black and white to get this color I'm working on now. I'm going to add some blue in as well in just a minute here, but I'm going to get some of this tone in first. Oop, hold on, I got a little too dark. Adding a little bit of white. In this case, I want it to be dull color. If you were painting something further along, I would not suggest using white to blend down unless you're trying to specifically dull a color. Alright, let's start adding some blue now. Even though it's a blue, it's a light gray blue, so it actually it comes across whenever you're on top of or alongside a brown, this really lovely gray tone. So it acts also as a little bit of a highlight, but it's still a mid-tone highlight. So you're not, you know, it balances with the brown, put it that way. I'm trying to keep with her fur pattern and direction. She's got some interesting fur patterns through here. And bringing in the lighter color brown will help offset with that blue and give you a sense of that actually having a highlight there. Plus it matches with the tone of her fur, which is very important. It's a little darker than it needs to be also. That's another important piece of this, is I'm painting this darker than the final colors will be. That's vital. Otherwise, if you were to try to put, let's say you're trying to go for the real life color right then and there, you're gonna find that your highlights just go nowhere. They won't show up whatsoever. And that is because you need some contrast for a highlight to show up. So everything needs to be darker than you think. Don't use bright white, even for your highlights for your underpainting. Use a gray tone. Very important. Bear with me, I'm just getting some color here for her around her eye. I hope my hand shadow isn't bothering the viewing too badly. I'm trying to avoid it, but it's hard to. So I'm looking at her, basically the shapes of her fur. The different color patterns will make different shapes. And so I'm trying to find the darkest areas of those shapes and filling those in with the darker shade. Then when I come in with the lighter shades, the lighter values, they'll contrast nicely and give it a sense of roundness, which is very important to give a lifelike look to your painting. Bear with me, I'm just mixing a bit here. Okay, need a little bit more warmth in that. I've got a very limited palette I'm working with. Most of it's browns, blue, and white. And I'm just mixing in different levels of white with it because I'm trying to keep it a little on the dull side right now. Again, that's for the purpose of contrasting later. You'll hear me say contrast all the time, but that's just how important it is. You need contrast for these things to stand out. And as you put down color, you can blend in and mix other color with it as you go. Once you start getting paint actually on the painting or on the canvas surface, things blend very well. So there is a bit of pink up there in that ear. I'm going to go ahead and start working some of that in. It's a little bit of a coral color. So I'm going to get some orange mixed in here. It's also a little on the dark shade. So I'm going to keep it toned down quite a bit. In this case, I'm using a flesh pink, what is that color? It's right on the tip of my tongue. Hold on. Let's see. I believe this one is an Indian yellow, just kind of a greenish shade of yellow, and then just a tiny touch of light red. So you get this kind of a brownish tone. I'm going to come back in as well with a, and this is just to get, again, the background shade, because she's got quite a bit of shadow in this ear, so I can't have it be too bright. I'll come back in with a little bit of purple shade mixed down with a little bit of blue to keep it nice and light. In fact, let's go ahead and do that now. So probably the best color for this is going to be a bit of a dioxazine purple. I love using dioxazine purple. It's a wonderful value to mix in. I know some people use them straight, but I quite love them to mix in. I mixed it with a light blue. I'm just going to bring in some of the edges of the ear shape on the inside. Don't worry about fur right now. Fur is going to come out over on top of this, so. And there's my little poppet girl. She's come for some sniffing and drinking. She's got a drinking problem. Kidding. She's just a cute little girl is all. Alright. Now some of this area here is going to have actually some very bright white fur. Remember what I said though about coming in with a darker color than what you think you need. This is to allow that contrast. Again, you're going to hear way too much about contrast from me. But again, that's how important it is. So let's get it in there early. It'll make things stand out whenever you're ready for it to. Bear with me, I'm just getting some more mix. Oh, she found her squeaker toy. Make it noisy in here. I don't know how much you guys can hear, but it's pretty funny listening to her. Playing with her sister Sarah, who's this one. It's actually been quite some time since I've done any artwork for my dogs. I don't know why, it's just somehow it's easier to paint other people's than your own. Anybody else have that issue? Bear with me, I'm just mixing this down a bit. Alright, so this area appears pretty white. So I'm going to come in with a warm light color. It's kind of a gray for the purpose of getting that undertone in. I'm just worrying about the inner shapes. I'll worry about the fur later. Alright. Just got a little bit of a black edge to it as well. So I'm going to start adding that in. Come back down here and add in that shadow to continue that shape. This will make more sense when we put the actual fur work itself in later. And I'll film that too if anybody's interested. Alright, so here she does have a bit of white, so we're going to go ahead and get some of that white shade I've already mixed. As you can see, it's a gray. Remember, contrast. Build that contrast. Yeah, I'm going to drive people nuts with that. Alright. Sorry, I think my hand was shading it. There we go. She has a bit of a black line across the top, so let's get that worked in. She has this funny little mark on her forehead that divides her face color-wise. And you can just see it at the very top, and then it comes down right through here. There we go. The rest of it's more of a brown shade. So I mix some brown in. Let's see, in this case, a little bit of Indian red mixed in with a little bit of burnt umber. And I'm using the tiniest touch of black, not to darken so much as to gray it down. That's the best use of black when you're mixing, is to gray things down, because it really black is not really there to darken things as much as it is to devalue a color, if that makes sense. It just takes away some of the warmth, grays it up. Very useful though. Make it a little bit more warmth in there. Just 1 second. Grabbing some raw umber here. Okay. There we go. It's very rich, warm brown for that spot right there. Okay. Needs to be just a hair lighter though. But to lighten, instead of using white, I'm going to use just a tiny touch of flesh pink. It makes this great little color. But it lightens it while keeping it warm. Warm brown. I'm just blending it in a little bit. Alright, so beneath that, I always keep a couple of different brushes handy. There's two mops here. One I'll use for the lighter colors, one I'll use for the darker. So, let's bring in some of the lighter value underneath the eye. Not quite dark enough. Let's get a little bit more in there. There we go. Now we'll add some additional tone here to sculpt this color. I think would be the best word for it. Because I want it to have the sense of being rounded. The best way to do that is to think about the curve and where your light's coming from, then your highlight is going to go in that same direction. So that's what I'm doing. It's following that highlight. Needs a little bit more dark though. Let's get that added. So again, just thinking of the shape. Deepest valley furthest away from the light gets the darkest paint, right? There we go. All right, starting to get some shape to it. Get a little more color in there. All right, so this area is a little bit on the softer brown side, but I need to lighten that a little bit. Do it this way. Okay, bear with me. There. All right, so it's a softer brown, not too dark. Adding just a little bit of light blue in there just to gray it up a hair. Just a tad too warm. There we go. And having this light next to a dark will actually help with the sense of shape. Bring a little bit more dark in there. There we go. I have a very brown spot right up here. Just go ahead and add it. So it's just got a very warm area color-wise up here to the front. So I'm going to mix some color that's a little on the warm side. Alright, this may be too warm for this spot, but we're going to try it. Just play as we go. Okay, got another color that's a little better for it, so let me mix that. Oh yeah, this is much better. Alright. Yes, perfect. See, I'm kind of scrubbing a little bit. Not the healthiest for your brushes, but you know, it is on a panel, so it's not quite as bad. I don't know that I'd really suggest you doing it, but you know, up to you. These are very inexpensive brushes, so I'm not quite as stressed about messing them up, and I've got quite a few of them, so not a big deal. And again, I'm just paying attention to the shape of the face itself, so I make sure that the shapes and forms catch the correct tone, whether it's mid-tone, shadow, or highlight. And I'll just keep building it in there. I'm just grabbing another brush. I've got a mid-tone brush right now, a highlight brush, and a shadow brush. Okay. Let's see, we need just a bit of yellow on this one. There we go. This is a nice bright color. It may not look like that much on the camera, but it is off, not quite white. It's got a bit of a yellow hint to it, a little bit of blue to keep it still gray, and again, that's for that later contrast. There's a few areas with this color, so we're just going to go ahead and get this added in. As this shape curves down and the light's coming down this way, I'm in this shape here, I'm darkening the areas of it that would be in the most shadow. And this will give it contour. And then we've got kind of the spot where it meets up. There, you can see the form there I'm talking about. This is a darker area right here, but it's not super dark. On this back end here, it's darker than the front end here. But there's also not only a curve going this way, but also back out. So I have to be mindful of the little pits and valleys and do darker in the pits. Like right through here where this curves down, it's going to catch more shadow right here. So I need that just to be a little bit darker. It actually would carry up just a little bit through here. There we go. And a valley right here. A little bit right up here. There we go. Then we'll come in with the mid-tone and connect them. Just a little bit of blending, not much. All right. Now, as you can see, there's a couple areas that have some pretty hard lines between the color values. I'm going to soften some of that up, so we'll go ahead and do that now. And you can also use a dry brush technique for that. What I mean by that is just simply a brush that has no paint on it. You just take your lighter color and move it into your darker. You can do vice versa, but you'll find that it gets, and you're going to have to wipe your brush off periodically too. You can still see my pencil line a bit, but don't let that worry you. That's just the way it is. It'll get covered later, so not a big deal. All right. Alright, you may notice it's starting to cover up a bit. That's because I actually used just a tad of white, more white mixed in. Purpose of that is white is very opaque, and so it covers it beautifully. Alright, moving back into the darker cheek areas. These are actually white patches of fur. I'm using a blue, light blue mixed with a little bit of brown, black, and dioxazine purple. Mixes I've already made, I'm just combining as I work. Okay. I'm just adjusting the colors as I go. So she's got a pretty clear delineation of this area where it's got a drastic dark to light difference. So I will leave that part there with the heavy contrast. Okay, so there are some areas that are a bit warmer looking in the shadows though. So I'm going to perk it up by just adding a little bit more of a warm Naples yellow hue to it right down here. Alright, this paint's getting a little dry, so I'm going to mix it with some of my medium here, just get some flow. There we go. And there should be some up here too, so we'll just go ahead and do that. Okay. So what this is right here is actually kind of a reflective light. And it's actually going to be really dark underneath the chin, but I want it to also be warm. So I'm going to add in the warm tone first. And also need some of it over here too to mix with gray. Alright, so let's buckle into that shadow area down here. And this will stay kind of on the warm side because I put warm color down here first. It'll just mix right there on the panel. But because I did the warm color first in this instance, it'll blend nicely from light to dark too. Okay, let's move back to the blue. I'm using a little bit richer of a blue. It's just simply called blue-gray. Now we're going to bring it in here, as well as right here for part of the muzzle, because this is not a heavy shadow, this is a lighter shadow. So we're going to use a cooler blue for this. For a deeper shadow, I'd probably use a much richer blue, like a French ultramarine, but this is the area that's not heavily burdened by shadow, so it's fine to keep it lighter in color. Here I'm actually, despite what it looks like, applying just straight white. It's just simply blending automatically with what's on my brush already, as well as what's on the canvas. So we have a dark area here in the face. This is where the muzzle meets. So we're going to go ahead and get some dark line work. This is where the lip is. The lips have curve to them. She's got some black spotting here on her lip as well. Go ahead and get that added. Now, the fun thing about the lips is they tend to kind of disappear through this section and then pop back out toward the front. So we're going to keep a very fine line right there. Very, very fine. Okay, so the lip area will also have a bit of a purple pink to it. It's pretty darn purple. So I'm going to take just a tiny tad of red and mix it with a cobalt violet hue, and you get this burgundy shade to it. I actually need to get just a little bit of, I always forget to get the colors, so I'm so used to just doing them. Flesh tint is just what it's called, and it comes out with this nice burgundy shade. I'm going to grab just a little bit of Naples because it will keep it a little bit on the warmer side. Oh, got a dog hair. Tell you what, dog hairs are just everywhere in our house. No matter what I do at this time of year, they're shedding. Can't vacuum enough to keep up with it. Okay, grabbing some of the gray in here too, and this is for blending purposes. Now, this will make more sense later whenever I come back in with the lighter colors. But this is just simply a way to start building the shape of the lip. Pretty much just same colors over and over again everywhere. Alright, so I'm mixing in some of that blue with this white to get the muzzle. This is going to allow the white to offset beautifully against it whenever we come back in for the detail work. And as you know, muzzles have whiskers. So there are these little channels of, you can see the line work here and here. There are these little channels that are rounded that have the whisker attachments in them. And so I've got to give them kind of a shape and form. So just like with anything that's round, the area that gets the most light gets the brightest tone. So right here along the top edge of this one, same thing right here and right here, and then we'll get the shadow part underneath it. I'm just going to be building that in little by little here. Okay. Of course, there's a bit of darkness around the nose. It's a little on the warm side though, so I'm going to add just a tiny touch of brown to this. It may not look like a big difference on the camera, but there is a tonal difference to it in person. Okay. And blend that out into the lighter shades to help build a sense of curvature. Go. She's such an unusual shape of color patching on her face. I just love it. Okay, coming back in with a little bit of just straight white, just to edge in some of those brighter ridges, some of the brighter highlights that catch more lighting. Doesn't need to be too obvious right now though. Alright, so let's eke into the nose. Everybody's favorite. I know, not really. I think a lot of people kind of fear the nose because of its shape, contours, and how to get that nose look. But start with the dark. Think of it as sculpting. Pay attention to the different shapes involved, and don't worry about it if you make a mistake. It's paint. It's about the most forgiving medium there is. Mess up, pfft, who cares? Just paint over it. No big. It's all a learning process. Okay, I'm just putting in some extra dabs of color that I fully anticipate blending. Their nose sticks out just a wee bit further than my drawing actually goes. Alright, so let's grab, where's my other one? Here it is. I've got a dry brush here because I don't want to mix other colors in with it. And it's a soft brush. This is another one of those Filbert's Escoda Prado number 6 size. So this has got a grayed down version of the black. I'm just gonna see by scrubbing in kind of mid-tone areas. See, there's a white ridge. It's right here along the nose where it catches the highlight, but there's a little valley right next to it, which is why I put that dark paint color patch right there. I'm just following the shape that I see. I'm not looking at the overall nose so much as I am the shape of that particular color tone. Getting in those mid-tones. So keep in mind too that the nose, you know, it's not a separate entity from the muzzle. It does attach. It may have brighter, darker areas, but you can make it look attached by going ahead and blending those areas in and then coming back in with highlights later. Knock that off. You'll see what I mean as I work here, hopefully. It'll make sense, I promise. Get some lighter color in there. Sometimes as you work, you may find that your color you think you have on your brush isn't quite the color you want it to be. And that's okay. Just immediately stop, grab the color you want, and come back. Alright, there we go. It may not look like much yet, but just bear with me. Gotta get something down first. Okay, now I'm going to start adding deeper, richer color as I go. This is one of those occasions where it doesn't hurt to go mid-tone to dark, because it's kind of hard to see the structures in the nose sometimes right away if you go too dark too soon. I wouldn't suggest doing that for the rest of the body though. Okay, and then we've got that shape here. Nose form. curves here. Okay, and it's darkest right about up here. I'm not too worried about it going over the edge just a little bit. And that's because I'll come in with a background, a base background, not the color I'm going to finish with, mind you. Just simply something to contrast against the color I do want to go with. And that'll actually help it stand out very nicely later. Like for instance, let's say I use blue for the background like I did on Poppy's painting. Then I will come back with a warm brown and it will offset incredibly against that blue. Oh, I've got so much glare it's hard to see. Okay, let's use one of the mop brushes. I'll blend certain areas. All right, now, don't overdo it, no reason to. That's good enough right now. Remember, we're not doing a final painting at the moment. We are strictly doing an underpainting. So I've got some more of the darker shade of warm brown down here, which I'd already mixed. I'm just using more of it. It's the same color I use through other areas. I'm coming in through here, make it a little more of my medium to get more flow. Will also help it to dry nicely. So there's a little bit of light that shines through a couple of areas. Get that there. And get a little bit of blue too. Just for this section it'll add. That way I can kind of contrast the darkest with the mid-tone. I love blue. I love mixing blue with browns. It makes this beautiful gray. It's still rich without losing its depth. Sorry, I moved my canvas by accident. Alright, so let's start moving into, this is a bunch of white fur down here, so it's all in shade. And that's why we're sticking with the dark color here. We'll mix in quite a bit more blue as we go though. Some blue, maybe a little more rich blue. And that's a great tone, great word to use. Can you see how blue that is, especially compared to here? So we've got shadow down here. That's why we're going to be putting blue in. You want to talk about a beautiful color to use for shadow, Fridge Ultramarine, one of my favorites for that. In this case, this is just a blue-gray. I just bought from the tube. I love this particular brand for that. Let's see. I've forgotten the name of it already. Let's see. It's 12 Shades of Gray, and it is, I don't know what the actual brand name is, but you'll find it on Jerry's Artorama. I've bought a couple of those because I just love their blue-gray. It means I don't have to mix it. Because it's a pain to have to mix colors all the time whenever it's a certain color you use frequently, like a blue-gray. So I'm getting the darker value in right there first, and I'm going to come in with a medium, more of a warm brown tone in certain areas. There we go. We've got a really dark tone right through here, so let me get that darkened in a bit more, and a little more. Let's see, follow that. It's a big patch there. There's another one. Create that shape. Get that darker. This is a big puff of fur that comes out toward the viewer. To get the best appearance for that, I need to kind of outline the darkest area underneath it. And then we're going to build up a mid-tone and then leave the highlight patch. There's another roll of fur through here, so I'm doing the same thing through this section. And then right here is just a nice patch of shade. So I'm just going to scrub it in. There we go. Okay, let's start building in that warm, bright color. It's going to take me just a second. Now, this is not white, this is just a kind of an off-white shade. I'm going to stick with the direction of the fur. I'm not trying to get in any particular actual definitive form yet of the fur. It's just to give it a sense of the shape. And the fur has some splits in it where there are parts, I guess would be the better word. So I'm just going to get those eked in here. Wait, go. Where's my darker one? There you are. Okay. I normally prefer using fresher paint. This has sat out all night because I was working a little bit last night too, and so it makes it a little harder to get the viscosity, the flow that I prefer to have. But, you know, it's not impossible. Medium brings stuff back to life. And then just a bit of blending. She's starting to get a bit of shape, isn't she? Just got a little bit more of a richer color down here. Let's get that mixed in. I'm just doing straight white added in now because I'm using it not as a color, but as a blender. I'm just taking it right through these other shades of tone that are already on the canvas or panel, as well as what's on my brush. Just going with the direction of the hairs. Okay. It's a good way to build up the patterns right away. Okay, so here's where we get into some of the more fun colors now. Her fur along her back is a nice rich color. So I'm blending that in with a little bit of raw sienna and a little bit of tiny amount of burnt umber and some Naples yellow to keep it a little on the light side. I'm going to mix just a tad of gray white into it just to dull it a hair so it's not overwhelming. May not look like a whole lot, but it'll be darker than the necessity of. Sorry guys, I'm not sure where it left off. Hopefully you didn't miss too much of that last part. Right now I'm just using the mop brush just to blend, the dry one, just to blend in a little bit in certain areas. Go. Alright, so as I mentioned earlier, I'll probably just do right now a little bit of a blue shade. Mix in probably just a bit of white. Yes, I'm just mixing straight onto the canvas. This is just as a contrast color to work from later. I am not going to leave it blue. I have plans for what I want to do in the background, but this is a great color to start with. And like I said before, you really want to get as much coverage, I'm sorry about the shadow, as much coverage as you can on the canvas to start with. It doesn't need to be perfect. This is just an underpainting for this part. Quite frankly, it helps to have a layer of paint, no matter what it is, on the panel first, because now your oils will adhere much better to them. And when you're making very specific paint strokes, you won't be struggling with it as much. So it makes a world of difference. Bear with me, just getting some paint on here. Just mix it straight on. This will just help me spread it everywhere quickly. This has been about 1 hour. It's about how long it takes to do this, because you need to be working quickly and just getting your color in as fast as you can. You don't want to get bogged down with detail work, and if you force yourself to try to get everything on there quickly, then you're not going to get bogged down with all that detail work. Detail comes later. I mean, this looks fairly detailed already, but by comparison to what it could have been, but nonetheless, always work quick in those first stages. It'll really and truly prevent you from going overboard with work that you're just going to wind up covering later. That's really the whole purpose of the underpainting, after all, right? It's just to establish your color, your shape, your form. It's not there to be the final painting. You are not painting in the beginning to make a final painting. It's part of the journey. You've bought your tickets, basically, if you think about it as a trip. That's probably a terrible comparison, but you get the idea. Bear with me. Getting some more color here. A little more white. Part of the reason I like the mop brush so much is because it moves the paint so thoroughly, so quickly, compared to a brush that's not a mop brush. All right, there's our underpainting. We're done. Thank you so much for sticking with me for so long. It was just a little bit under an hour, and I'll include a final image of what it looks like a bit later. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to DM me with any questions that you might have. I will be doing a sped up video as well as a regular time, of course. I'm going to get just a little bit more dark color over here. Here we go. All right, so we'll come back to this in another stage to do the next layer, which will be, I don't really call it necessarily an underpainting. It's more of a foundational stage that'll help build in richer and darker tones and move into some of the slight detail work, and then the last stages will be the detail work. After all, you don't put furniture into just the frame of a house. You wait till you've got your walls up and your paint on before you put furniture. Well, thank you guys, and I really appreciate you sticking with me through all of this. And this is my girl Serafina, just so you can see what she looks like. There she is. That's my beautiful girl. Thank you so much. Have a great day.